All right. Welcome, everyone. I think we can go ahead and get started.
All right, sounds good. Let's see. All right, there we go. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us and being here with us today. We'd like to start off with a brief statement of solidarity. So we want to acknowledge that these are really difficult times, and we recognize that the pandemic and other structural inequalities have disproportionately affected people of color, particularly Black and Indigenous peoples. As members of the UCR community, we stand with Black Lives Matter against racial injustice, police brutality, and other human rights violations. We also recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, as well as their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Though we now meet in digital spaces, we invite you to learn whose ancestral lands you're located on using this web address here on the slide. So we are all still adjusting to remote work and school, and that's okay. For this workshop, we encourage you to do what is most comfortable for you. So you are welcome to keep your camera off and to communicate through the chat box as needed. And now we'll briefly introduce ourselves. So my name is Sandy Enriquez. I'm the Public Services, Outreach, and Community Engagement Librarian for Special Collections and University Archives, which is also known by its acronym SKUA.
And I'm Rachel Starry. I'm fairly new to the UCR library, and I'm the Digital Scholarship Librarian in Research Services. So basically today, I know a lot of you might be joining us for different purposes, so we're very interested in hearing, what you all are interested in learning. So as you're introducing yourselves, please feel free to kind of share, why you are attending this workshop and what you're most interested in learning in the chat. But basically today we're going to kind of look at a few things in particular. And we should also mention that this is, I think, the first collaboration workshop between SKUA and Research Services. So we're excited to kind of test this out, see how it works. So our goals for today are to kind of discuss some of the best practices for finding and reusing archival images, but also just archival materials in general, and we'll kind of use those terms interchangeably. We're also going to talk about, or Sandy's going to talk about some of the best ways to cite materials that you find in digital archives. And then the second half of the workshop is going to be focused on Zotero and some kind of tips and tricks for using Zotero to manage archival materials, because as you're, especially, and this is kind of more generally relevant for folks, if you have all kinds of research materials, but especially for when you're downloading stuff from archives that can get out of hand really quickly. So help organize those materials more easily.
Great. So a brief agenda for today. We're going to be starting with a very brief intro to what SKUA is, and then we're going to dive into reusing, citing digital archival images and materials, as well as where to find digital archival images and materials. And then we're going to move into Rachel's portion, looking at the Zotero and how to organize your materials with that. All right, so let's jump in. So if you haven't visited before, SKUA is located on the 4th floor of the Rivera Library. We have 759 physical archival collections, and approximately 6% of those collections have been digitized and are available online. And archives differ from libraries in that they tend to hold fragile or rare materials. So that's why those materials cannot be checked out. You need to come to our reading room, to our physical space, and access those materials that way. But due to the pandemic, as you can imagine, no one's allowed on campus right now. So we are working on creating a more robust digitization process so that we can still assist researchers, even though they can't physically visit us anymore. So some of the restricted services, as I mentioned, no in-person visits, and we only have one SKUA staff member on site. So that's one person to do all of the digitization requests. That's why there might be some delays in capacity. However, we do offer other services. We're available for research consultations, either through email or through Zoom. We're also going to be doing some fall Zoom drop-in hours next quarter. And then we're working on building some digital resources, such as video tutorials and guides, including our guide to University Archive. And that's just going to give you more information about our large collections. And as I mentioned previously, we are creating more resources for digitization. So there's a new policy now that any UCR affiliate, whether you're a faculty member, a staff member, or a student, you can get up to 200 pages digitized for free every month. And even past 200 pages, we can still digitize that for you for free, but we do ask that you meet with a librarian first. And that's just so the library can help you, find more materials in your scope, in your help you narrow down a focus. So trying to make that as accessible as possible for folks. Okay, so let's talk about reusing and citing digital archival images and materials.
Yes, so we're not going to spend too much time on the copyright aspects of that, but since, and I'm looking in the chat, y'all have kind of a really broad range of different kinds of research interests and needs. So some of you might have different restrictions in terms of the materials that you're working with than others, but we just wanted to kind of call attention to this because as you're working with images, that you didn't create yourself, right? There are, you might run into some restrictions on how you can use those. So essentially, copyright information should be included in any digital archive in some way, in the right statements field. Sandy will kind of get into that in more detail. But essentially, copyright in the US entitles folks who create content in a fixed form, and that can be text, images, audio, video, 6 exclusive rights for the things that they create, right? So the right to reproduce those things, no one else can make copies of them, to create derivative works, right? Like adapting a book into a play or a movie, to distribute copies, and that's related to reproducing, but also displaying and performing. So there's kind of ways that, we might not think that would be, violating copyright by, sharing an image online, but those are all rights that are restricted to just the creator of the work, unless there's an exception or they've licensed it in a more open way. And then on the next slide, we have, just to kind of reiterate this, so all of those things, reproducing images and documents, making changes to them, displaying them, distributing them, that all counts as reuse. You'll want to be careful about reusing it and where you reuse it. There are exceptions to this, and again, not a copyright workshop, so we're not going to go into too much detail. You may have heard of like fair use. There's also exceptions for the classroom use of and educational use of materials, reproductions for accessibility, right? Like turning a print book into a braille book. But generally, what we just want to kind of get across is it's really useful and important to check the right statements on digital archives to find out about the copyright restrictions and other restrictions that are on the materials. And we have some links in here for as guidelines. And then just wanted to mention public domain is one of those kind of really big exceptions. So if something is in the public domain, that does mean that it is free to use and reuse. It kind of belongs to everybody. So the kinds of things that are in the public domain could be, content that was originally copyrighted, but the copyright term limit has expired. So generally, things created before 1925 are in the public domain now. Material can also be released directly into the public domain at any time by its creator. Someone can give up their copyrights. Certain things just can't be copyrighted at all, right? Facts and ideas, things created by government employees in the course of their work. And we have some other links here for more information about public domain stuff. But for folks who are interested in finding material that is free to use or reuse, we have a couple of really great resources here. The Library of Congress has some they've called out specific collections that are free to use and reuse. Wikimedia Commons is a great place to find openly licensed images, and Creative Commons Search is another good place to find openly licensed research materials.
Did we want to do the polls, Rachel? Because I think this is...
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for reminding me. So we have, because then thank you for all for sharing your research interests in the chat. We also have a poll on how you all most frequently use and reuse different kinds of archival materials. So the poll is open now. It should be on your screen. So the first question is, what are the different kinds of materials that you most frequently work with? And then the second question is, what are the different ways you most commonly reuse archival materials or other kinds of images and things that you encounter in your research? So we're seeing a lot of documents. I think documents looks like it's the number one in question number one. And after we've ended the polling, we can share the results with you all so you can see it. Mm-hmm. It is anonymous. Give it a few more seconds and then we can end it. All right, I'm gonna end the polling and share the results. So it looks like documents are really up there. A lot of you are also working with images and maps. Publishing is the number one, so that's an area where copyright really does come into play. Someone also shared in the chats footage of performance and interviews. And yeah, interesting, cool. Thank you all for sharing. We can certainly get into some details if we have time later on. And as Sandy's going through the citing, this is also really helpful to know.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so real quickly, why is it important to cite archival images and materials? Well, number one, it demonstrates that those materials have value. So when archives get the funding to be able to digitize materials and put them out into the public, it helps if you cite them because it justifies the archive's investment into that digitization, and showing that there's a good investment, that there's a good result from that may lead to more digitization in the future. And secondly, when you cite materials, you make it easier for future scholars to continue doing research in that field. So hopefully other scholars will see the materials that you've used, will have an interest in it, and will continue doing that research. So you're kind of you're helping the scholarly communication wheel continue turning. And number three is just best practice. Citing materials shows that you are a serious scholar and that you respect the scholarly field. And so each citation style, by which I mean like MLA, APA, Chicago, etc., has its own preferences on how they prefer archival materials to be cited. And in addition to that, individual archives may also have their own preferences and their own citations. So when you're citing an archival item, there's a difference when you're citing a physical item versus a digital item. And all of those citation styles will take that into consideration. But the main difference is that a physical item is going to have a folder and a box number, whereas a digital item may not have that, but it will have a web address. So those are the two main differences that you need to keep in mind. When in doubt, if your professor hasn't specified a particular citation style to use and the archive hasn't specified a particular or preferred citation style, this is the main metadata or information about this item that you're going to want to look for. So number one, a creator or an author. Number two, a title for the individual item. Number three, a date. Four, the name of the collection to which this item belongs to. And number five, a unique identifier for that specific item. So kind of like a book has a call number, each archival item will also have its own identifier. And if it's a physical item, you're going to also include the box and the folder number. And then number six, you'll include the name of the archive, of course. Some of them will even ask for the location of the archive. And seven, the web address, if it is a digital item. And perhaps most importantly, always review the right statement. So you're not going to include anything about the right statement in a citation, but it's always something that you're going to keep an eye out for all the reasons that Rachel mentioned earlier. Depending on how you're planning to use this item, you definitely want to know what is the copyright status of this item. Is it in the public domain? Is it not? That's going to affect how you cite that or how you work with that item in your research. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about finding digital archival items and materials. The site that I'm going to start with today is Calisphere, and that's kind of like a union catalog of archival materials across California. So this is going to include materials from institutions like libraries, museums, and archives all across the state of California. They're all contributing their records, their individual records, to this search engine. So it's a nice, easy way to search all those different repositories and institutions with just one search bar. Okay, so we're here in Calisphere. This is the main search engine bar here. I have a particular item that I'm going to be looking for, but in a little while later, we're going to look at another site, and then I'll ask folks in the chat box to suggest some search terms there. So if you want to start thinking about some search terms that you might be interested in looking at, definitely let us know. And so with this search, we already see that we have over 4,000 items coming back. We could even narrow this down by specific collections. For instance, if we wanted to find a particular collection title. On the side, we have some different filters. We could filter by format, by decade, by the institution itself. So as I mentioned, this Calisphere is recording records from all kinds of institutions. It includes the entire UC system, as well as a lot of other libraries and museums. So the particular item that I'm interested in looking at is this one right here. And I know it's a little underwhelming at first because the image is so small, but that's just because Calisphere is not hosting this image. They're not hosting this record. They're just linking to it. So they're giving you a sneak peek of all that metadata. So we can already start seeing some of the things that we want to keep an eye out for our citation, like the title. In their case, they're calling it a contributor, but that would be the creator or the author of this work. And we already see rights information here. Please contact contributing institution. Yeah, so that's probably like a default that Calisphere is going to do because they figure each institution is going to cover the individual rights information for their item. So let's go ahead and look at the source image on the contributor's website. So for those of you who are from ECR, you may be familiar with this format. This is kind of the same like catalog format that we use in the library. And we see here some more of the metadata that we were looking at before. You'll notice under links, we see Grizzly Bear, high resolution TIFF. So TIFF is good. That's a really high quality format. It's archival quality format for a download. So if you click that, yeah, it's gonna just go ahead and download the image for you. But we want to see more information and see if they're gonna give us a citation. So I'm scrolling down, I see a digital version's available, and then here's the physical information. Let's go ahead and click on that digital item. All right, so now we have a better view of it, and we see that we could download it again. And I think you can see down here, but it looks like this download was only a JPEG. So it's a lower resolution. And depending on what you're using this for, whether it's going to be for publishing and you need a high quality image, in which case you would want the TIFF, or if it's more for maybe a paper and you're not really planning to print it, then a JPEG may be sufficient. But as you can tell, this particular institution, which I believe is the California State Library, didn't make that very easy to find. Like they didn't give you the option of a JPEG or a TIFF. It just depended on which link you clicked on. So that's just something that you want to be aware of, that each archive is going to have a different level of ease of use. And some of the ones we'll look at later make it a lot easier to pick what resolution you want to download. In this case, it was kind of just, we had to explore and see what was there. But from this page, you can tell that there's no preferred citation. We just see some more of the same information as before. This is a little bit confusing because it says description, but this is what we would consider its unique identifier, because we see it right next to the title as well. So those are just things to keep an eye out for. Let's head back to our presentation. Okay, so from here, I'm just going to show you an example of how these citation styles may differ. So here we have the MLA citation style, and their preference is that you just use their genre appropriate citation as the default. So for instance, if you were citing a book, it would be different than if you were citing like a photograph. And then at the end, they want you to tack on the box number, the folder number, if applicable, its unique identifier, the name of that archival collection, and then the name of the archive. Institutional affiliation would be like if it was special collections at University of California, Riverside. So that's optional. Location, the date you've accessed it, and if it's a digital item, then it would be its web address right there. In contrast, so APA is kind of asking for the same information, but they have a little bit of the difference. They're looking for a description of the material if there is no title, and they're also asking you put it in brackets. And then they've also put their box folder and their unique identifier in parentheses. So kind of subtle differences, but those are the kinds of things you want to look out for. So there's a lot of resources to finding archival images and materials online. In this PowerPoint, I've kind of selected some of the most authoritative ones, some of the ones that have the broadest scope, which is what you see on this page. All right, we have a few minutes left for my section, so let's go ahead and take a look at New York Public Library. Okay, so Rachel, maybe you can give me a suggestion if there's any search term suggestions in the chat box that folks have been giving, or I can just think of one.
Folks have such a wide variety of different projects it sounds like they're working on. So I think maybe just a general search sheet you have prepared.
I always pick Peru for my search term because I am Peruvian American. So it's always a fun one to look at. So here we have some different filters compared to Calisphere, and very cool, we can actually search by public domain item only. So again, that's something that if you're publishing, you know, that's going to be a big help to you to be able to narrow down to that scope. So let's just go ahead and take a look at this first one. As you can see, this catalog record is a lot more robust than the previous one from Calisphere or from the California State Library. Now we have the option to download in different resolutions. Could even order an art print of this if we wanted to. And we have a little sneak peek of the metadata here, and we also see cite this item. So if we click that, they've already given us the different citation formats here, which is really helpful, really nice to have that. And if you wanted to do a different citation style, they still have the metadata listed out for you. So it's easy to look for the title, you know, the date, etc. See, okay, good. So they have the right statement right down here. And it looks like they're unable to make a conclusive determination to the copyright status of this item. So the onus is kind of put on the researcher to do that additional, you know, investigation to find out if they can print this item or not. But this is just a really nice resource to have in comparison to Calisphere. Okay, so some other you know, repositories that I've listed on here are international, which is also really great to get a more different, you know, diverse set of materials. And I've also included some specific to art history, because that's a particularly strong area where archival images are digitized online. The one that I want to show here real briefly is the documents of Latin American and Latino art. So this is actually a new collection. It was just released to the public about a month ago. So it's very exciting in the archive world, especially if you're interested in Latin American studies. You can do a search here in the bar. So I'll go ahead and do the same one. And the interesting thing about this is that because it is also a documents project, you're getting more text-based results as well. So we can see, looks like we have some magazine covers, some articles. Let's try this one. So we can go ahead and zoom in to the image to be able to read it more in depth. If we want to download, there is the option, but it looks like we're going to have to log in or register. So that's something to keep in mind. For our metadata, we can easily find our title, our creator, the year. The record ID would be its unique identifier. And here, because this is more of like a museum background, they create more of a narrative around the item. So we have a synopsis, like a summary of what this item is about, as well as some research that a curator or other staff person at this museum has done on this particular item. And it looks like they're showing other suggestions for things to look at. So it's kind of interesting to see, you know, how archives differ between like libraries and universities as well as museums. It looks like there is no preferred citation or examples of other citations. So this is one where you would need to build it yourself, but it's a good example of one that gives you a lot of metadata to work with. Okay, so in summary, the two things you really want to remember are that being able to download an image doesn't give you permission to reuse it. It doesn't give you automatic permission, at least. In general, downloads are there for educational or personal use only. If you are interested in publishing and you have more questions about this topic, we recommend that you reach out to Brianna Marshall. She's the Director of Research Services in the library, and she would be able to help you with those questions. And secondly, cite your archives. Help the archives out. Let us know when you are using our materials. That helps you, your colleagues, and future researchers. So I think we'll take a pause here and just see if there's any questions so far.
Yes, feel free to throw any questions in the chat. There haven't been any questions, Sandy, that I've seen so far come through.
Sounds good.
But we'll also try and reserve a couple of minutes at the very end if folks do have questions that are archive specific or Zotero specific. And if you have Zotero questions, will this PowerPoint be available later? Yes, so we will send out, actually the PowerPoint is available right now. I'll copy that link again. That link will take you to the slides. And we will also share all of the materials and a link to the recording and everything in an email to everyone who registered after this. Great question. All right, so let's go ahead and turn over and start looking at Zotero. So I will start sharing my screen. Okay. Oops. All right, so let me pop actually back into our slides. I always hit the wrong button. All right, so using Zotero for archival research, we'll also be going over some really general Zotero things. So hopefully this will be useful to everyone. And I'll note as well that we did a more in-depth Zotero workshop in May. So I can also share the link to the recording of that if you need a really general refresher. And I'm also, Sandy and I are both available for consultations. So if you have questions, definitely send us emails at any time. So why would we want to use Zotero as a way to manage our research materials? It's a really easy to use citation and file manager. It's open source, so you are able to collect all of your materials and citations in it, and you can easily access that when you leave UCR. If you decide that you don't like Zotero and you want to start using a different citation manager, you can always export your citations. You can always get things out of Zotero if you want. It also has both a desktop and a browser-based version. So depending on what your research workflow looks like, if you're using one laptop all the time, you can install it locally, but you can also access your Zotero library anywhere just by logging in a browser. And we'll be looking mostly at the desktop version today. But it can also be used offline. So you don't have to have an internet connection to work with your citations. You can still access them even when you don't have an internet connection. So we're not going to look at the installation process today, but generally the way that Zotero works, it kind of has two pieces. So if you do want to use that desktop version, you have to download and install Zotero. So this screenshot is just showing what it looks like for me because I'm using a Windows machine and I'm using Firefox. So Zotero automatically detected that and it's suggesting these two components for me to install. So you'd install the local, desktop version, as well as if you use, Chrome or Firefox or Safari. They have different plugins for the different browsers that will make it really easy to import materials from online databases and websites and resources. And that's the fastest way to get citations into Zotero is using that browser connector. So what we'll look at today, we'll kind of do a general overview of the Zotero interface to kind of demystify it. It has a really iTunes, vibe, really kind of easy to use interface, but it can be a lot. It can be overwhelming at first. There's lots of buttons and stuff. We'll talk about some strategies for organizing your citation library. Zotero allows you to kind of group things into collections, use notes and tags, alternate ways of organizing your materials. We'll look at importing citations into Zotero from digital archives using that browser plugin. And we'll also, because this is really specifically about organizing, your research materials, we'll look at kind of two strategies for using Zotero to organize citations and the files that you have on your computer. And that includes one process that's, where you just link to files, and then one process that's kind of storing things really inside of Zotero. And we'll look at that difference in a minute. All right, so we'll come back to look at that workflow, but for now, let's just take a look at the Zotero interface. So the first thing I like to do when I open up Zotero and kind of, do an overview of this interface is point out that there's really 3 different panes. So over here on the left-hand side, we have this collections display pane. So this shows us our library. Everyone gets one library. And then all of the different collections, so the different folders in Zotero are called collections, that we have in our library. This might look a little different, for you, because I also have these different group libraries. If we have time later at the end, we can talk about using Zotero for collaboration. It's possible for lots of different people to contribute to, a single group library and kind of share citations. So that can be really useful. So this is, where all those collections live. In the center pane here is our item display pane. So these are all of the different citations that I have in this particular collection. It's just a test, a sample collection for the workshop today. And these are, all the different citations that I have. And then I also have actual files that I've attached to these different citations. So Zotero can store lots of different kinds of items. And it does that in a couple of different ways. But essentially, if you bring in like a JPEG, that will always appear as an item, like an attachment to a citation. So citations are kind of the fundamental way that Zotero organizes items. And then over here on the right-hand side, we have this third pane or sidebar, and this is the item details. So, and I apologize if you hear my cat in the background. Sandy was talking about all the different kinds of metadata that you would want to be collecting, all the different pieces of information about, a document or image, things that you're, storing. And all of those pieces of information can be slotted in here to make it really easy to generate citations or generate bibliographies with Zotero. We're not going to look too much today at like the word processor integrations of Zotero or generating bibliographies, but if you have questions about those, certainly throw them in the chat. We'll get to them if we can, or, again, I'll refer you all to the more extensive Zotero workshop recording. All right, so if you want to organize your materials, say you have different projects going on, you have different research papers you're writing or articles you're working on, Zotero makes it really easy to organize your materials into different collections. So if you want to create a new collection, you can do that a couple of different ways. You can go up if you just want to create a new collection inside of your library. You can create that with this little folder icon, and you can enter a new name for that. So I'll just create a new collection that way. And that's a top level collection. But if you want to create additional folders inside of a collection that you already have, you can right click on that and you get this little context menu. So you can do a lot of different things in here. You can rename the collections, delete them. I'm going to create a new sub collection. Within Zotero Workshop, and you'll see when you create it, nothing is going to appear in it, but it's really easy to move stuff around. So say you have a main project folder and you want to create subfolders for, each different archive that you're downloading things from, or, however you're organizing your materials, you can do that and then very easily drag and drop stuff to separate them out into different subfolders. Or when you're importing and creating citations, you can put them directly into those folders. lots of options. But to move things around, you can really just drag and drop. So if I wanted to move, you know, these two citations, I just control clicked. It's command click, I guess, on Macs. And then you can just drag and drop. So I want to put these two in subfolder. So I'm just dragging them. And now those two citations are in that new folder that I created. Again, if you want to delete a folder, super easy to do that as well. You can right click on it and you have this option to delete the collection or delete it with the items inside. I'm not going to do that because I want to keep those two citations. So I'll just click delete this collection. You get a confirmation. The items won't be deleted, just the folder. So now we just have the main folder again. All right. So another thing that's really useful in the context of organizing archival materials in particular is looking at the different kinds of citations, different kinds of items that Zotero lets you store. So you'll notice here that there's different icons. So if you look over in the items detail pane over here, this item type will change as we look at different kinds of items. So you can store citations for books, for book sections, for articles, for web pages. This one's a dissertation or thesis. But there's also types for primary sources like art and documents and photographs and different things like that. So you can click here and change this. So there's all these different options for ways, you know, audio recordings, radio broadcasts, podcasts, lots of different options. And each of these different item types has different metadata fields, different pieces of information that it requires. So if I changed this item type from artwork to a book, say, it's not a book, but if I do that, I'll get this, this pop-up that says some fields will be lost, right? Because books don't have a medium. The medium is paper or whatever. But let's see what happens. So if we change this to book, now we have all of these different book metadata items, right? Things you would need to recreate the citation for this book. So that's something that you can do, especially Zotero. When we look at importing items, Zotero may or may not correctly recognize item types, especially when you're downloading or you're importing citations from digital archives. So it might, you know, when I try and import an image, it might think it's a web page, it might think it's a blog post. So you'll have to change that item type and kind of move this, the metadata around a little bit so it's accurate. All right. I'll also note here, there's other tabs. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically info, this is where all of the citation information lives. Notes will show you if there are any notes attached to your item, so you can add notes to individual items so using this notes tag. So then you'll get this nice text editor. I use Zotero personally as a place to kind of centralize all materials so that when I am like, where did I read that thing about that one thing? I can just search for a particular term or person or location, and it will search all of the PDFs that I have, all of the notes that I have, everything that is indexed inside of Zotero is searchable. So you can add a note here, and then you'll have that note attached to a particular item. You can also add standalone notes. So say you have, you know, a folder for a project and then lots of different folders inside of that project. You could add a standalone note inside of each of those folders with information about the archive or, you know, whatever the materials are in that folder that you're trying to organize. And you create a standalone note with this sticky note button up here. You can also, if you're clicked on an item, add a child note to that item like we just did. So then we just get it and it shows up as an item and you can put whatever text in here you want. Tags are just, again, searchable keywords that you can add to different items. So it's another way of kind of organizing your materials. You can create thematic tags to help you find things. You can create tags for different archives that you're getting things from, really whatever you want to use that for. And then related items is a way to connect multiple citations together. So for instance, if you don't want to have subfolders, you know, for different documents you're downloading from an archive, you could create, one folder for your project and then use related items to, if I had downloaded Abraham Lincoln papers, multiple PDFs, I could join them all together using this related items feature. And that will let you select multiple things. And then when you click on, Abraham, well, I'll add a related item, even though something's not related to it. And then this will show up here. And then when you click on it, it will take you to it. So it's easy to kind of link items together. It's just another way of organizing things. Okay. So I got a question just to repeat what I just said. So the related items feature is a way to join different citations together. So if I imagine that I've downloaded lots of different Abraham Lincoln speeches and I want to be able to find them all, at one click, I can add them all as related items to each other. And then when I click on any of them, the others will show up here in this list. All right, so let's turn now and look at importing items from digital archives. I'm going to move back to my browser. All right, so let's start off just looking at something in Calisphere. And we can do the same search, I suppose, that Sandy did. I'm seeing a question, where is this all saved? Can you save to the cloud? Yes, so there is a cloud when you sign up for Zotero, and that's something I didn't quite mention. So if I go back over here to zotero.org, you see this option to log in. So you can create a free account. And I believe everyone gets 300 megabytes of free storage in the cloud. I will have to double check on that. I have it written down somewhere. And this is also how you use that collaboration feature. So you can, once you have your Zotero account, collaborate with other people using their Zotero, usernames. And this is also how you access your library remotely. So if you set syncing up, and I hadn't planned to talk about syncing today, but if that's of interest to a lot of folks, we can talk about it. You can sync your local library, right? Like in Zotero desktop here. I can sync my library, and if you notice this little thing was going earlier, it last synced 2 minutes ago with Zotero.org, meaning my library now has been backed up to the cloud. You will run into storage limits with the free account if you're adding a lot of content and you have it set. There's a settings option in here to specify how you're syncing. So you can either sync full text content or not. You can choose whether or not to sync attachment files. But you can, again, if you're adding a lot of stuff, and we're gonna look at one strategy for storing things in your Zotero library, actually storing PDFs and images and all your research materials in Zotero, you might wanna uncheck this because then you'll kind of hit that cloud limit. All right, so I said I wasn't gonna do that, but I showed it to you anyways. I think it's really useful, the syncing thing. We can talk about that more if that's useful. All right, let us look at importing items. So we've gone back into some place that we're looking at research materials, and we want to import some of those. All right. I have a bunch of plugins on this browser, but this one is the Zotero one. So if you have installed your browser plugin for whatever browser you're using, up here on your, your toolbar, you'll see an icon. And depending on what kind of, web page you're looking at, you'll see different icons appear. So Zotero is recognizing that this is a Google presentation, and this is a web page. So if you're on something like the library catalog, actually, let me just navigate there to kind of show you what this looks like. If we search for something on the library catalog, and you navigate to any place where you're going to see a lot of different search results, the Zotero icon will actually change to be a folder. So that's a folder now, and it says Save to Zotero. And if I click on it, I'll get the option to add lots of different items at once. So if I want to save, this book and the next book, I can do that and hit OK. And it will, Zotero will look at these citations here on this page and save them both to whatever folder I had open. So I have Zotero Workshop open, if I navigate to this test folder and I do the same thing, I apologize for background sounds on my computer. And I do the same exact thing if I want to, you know, just save this book. You'll notice this will change from a folder to a book icon, because now we're looking at just one book. That will save to test because I'm navigated to the test collection. So it works the same way if you're importing citations from different digital archives. So if I navigate to an item in an archive and I want to import the citation, I will get the same option. I can use Zotero's browser plugin button to import the item. I'm not sure. It's being a little slow. I see a question in the chat. Are you saving the citation of a book or the entire text? So that's a great question. If you are connected remotely through like a VPN to library resources that we have access to, you know, you can import full text PDFs directly from databases. So if I was navigated to like JSTOR or someplace where I do have access to the full text, like a PDF file, Zotero will grab that PDF file. Zotero, though, and this is something that's really, you know, unfortunate about doing archival research with Zotero, it's not typically going to recognize that this is, you know, a document, or it won't recognize that an image is an image. It's pretty much always going to think that this is a web page, even though we have all of this fantastic metadata, you know, citation information right here. Zotero is not fantastic about pulling that in. And I think that's true for most citation managers. They're just not equipped to handle the way that these different databases are formatted. But what you can do is, and this is the workflow I would recommend, is you're navigated to, you know, whatever folder you're storing your, you know, your materials for this particular project in, and you can use Zotero to save essential information, right? It'll save the title of this item, and it will grab some other things. So let's see what else it grabbed. It grabbed that it was from Calisphere. It also grabbed the URL to the item, which is maybe the most important thing. As you're doing archival research, it's really easy to, you know, be moving through and like grabbing all kinds of stuff that seems interesting, or you save the URL or where you found it. Sometimes it can be hard to go and find that item again if you don't have, you know, like this specific information about the title of the item and where you found it from. So Zotero's already grabbed that information and you don't have to worry about finding this again. It's in your Zotero library. So that's an immediate benefit. And then what you can do is just go and look through, you know, all these different pieces of information that Sandy was talking about, and just manually put those into Zotero. And then you'll always be able to find that and create the citation in an effective way. You can also add items from your computer. So if you have downloaded things, so I'm going to go ahead and download this item, and I'm missing the download button. I think you have to do it on the source.
Yeah, if you go to the contributors website, you should be able to see it.
Yes, download button, okay. So I'm gonna save this file to my desktop, and then you can get it into Zotero in a couple of different ways. So I have this citation for this item, and I now also have the download on my desktop. So to link those two things, I can right click on the item. And actually, let's see. The easiest thing to do is to actually go up to this green plus sign. So this is how you manually add new items. And here you can, you know, add all different kinds of citations, but you'll also see these two options. You can link to a file, or you can store a copy of the file. And here is where I kind of want to pause and have a kind of more abstract discussion about workflows. So I'm just going to go back to this slide here. There's kind of two approaches to organizing your research materials with Zotero. And there's pros and cons to both. So workflow number one is where everything just lives in Zotero. It will live in the Zotero folder where that is on your hard drive, right? So it's still locally, you can still sync it to the cloud if you want to, but it's 100% in Zotero. And this is a good approach if you are just doing this process in the same way I'm doing it right now. Like I'm actively searching through different archives and I'm downloading those materials, and I'm saving them as citations in Zotero at the same time. So for that process, you can download stuff. It doesn't really matter where you download it to. I just have it, downloading to my desktop or to your downloads folder. You create the citation in Zotero, and then we will store the copy of the file in Zotero. And then you can delete that original download because you don't need that second copy anywhere else. It'll be in Zotero, and that's where you'll go when you want to access those images or PDFs or whatever. Option number 2, and this is better, especially if you already have folders and folders full of research materials on your laptop that aren't in Zotero, you can add the citations to Zotero, and you can let those things live where they already live. They can live, maybe you have a really great organization that you already have going for your files on your computer. And you have different, project folders and things. You can still link Zotero to those items to make it a lot easier for you to find them and cite them as you're, doing your research. So in that sense, things live wherever they live, and you just linked them. I'm seeing a question, is there a way to link Zotero to Google Drive folders? I don't believe so, but it might be possible. I'll follow up with you on that one. Yeah, I'll make a note about that one because that's a great question. I don't think there is, but I don't want to lie. All right, so workflow number 2 is things live where they live. So if you're doing your research, like live in the sense, like you can download stuff wherever you want it to live. You'll want to put the, your images and PDFs where you want them to permanently stay. Because once you create that link to Zotero, if you move that item, the link will break. So let's look at what that looks like in Zotero. So I have this option here. I have this citation in Zotero, and I have the item currently on my desktop. So what I want to do is workflow number 1 and have it live in Zotero. And then I can just, empty my downloads folder and not worry about it. So here I'm going to store a copy of the file. So I'm going to navigate to where that is. It automatically looks on my desktop. So I'm going to open that up. And you'll just want to make sure that it is associated with its citation. Sorry. So you'll just drag and drop it. So now this item, this citation is in my Zotero collection, right, for this project or whatever. And I have this image here and I can open it up. It'll open up in whatever your, native image viewer or PDF viewer is, in theory. I'm not sure if this is an error with Zotero or with Zoom. Okay, there it is. It was just something weird about, I think, Windows Photo Viewer. So there's the image. It is stored in your Zotero installation location on your computer. So that's option number 1. But if you, for example, have existing materials and you just want to link them to citations that you've added to Zotero, you do the other option. So instead of storing a copy, we're going to link to the file. So imagine that this is somewhere permanent, and I'm not going to move this. Right now it's on my desktop, so this is a bad example. Because if I deleted it off my desktop at any time in the future, the link would break. But I'm going to just add it here, and you'll notice that here we just see the image. The icon is just kind of like a document, a page. But here you have this little link icon. So that tells you this is a link to the file rather than the file itself. And you can do the exact same thing. You'll just drag and drop it and associate it with the citation. So that's kind of the second option. And that, it might seem really obvious, but I'm mentioning this because it's really easy if you do the linking. If you go with that route, that workflow, and then your hard drive, things change, file paths change, that can kind of throw a wrench in your research process. All right, so we have several minutes left for questions, if folks have questions in the chat. If you move the file that you have linked, will Zotero automatically update it? No. So that is why it's really important. I recommend workflow number 2, linking to files, only if those files aren't going to move. Right? You have them where you want them, and they're going to live where they live. Because that link, it will break. You can update it manually, But say you have, dozens of pictures or dozens of PDFs, that's a problem. Can you link to an external hard drive? Yes, you can link to files wherever they are, but if you take that external hard drive away from Zotero, or you unplug it from your computer and you try to use the link, Zotero will get confused and it won't be able to find the file. So your hard drive will have to be connected anytime you want to find the files that are linked, if that makes sense. Other questions? So someone has files on their computer and want to store things in Zotero using workflow number 1. Is there a fast way to do that? You can batch ingest things into Zotero. So if you're wanting to store copies of the files, so you can move them or delete them elsewhere, you can select multiple things here. So I don't know if I have a folder that just has I'm kind of scared live to navigate to my pictures folder, But if there were many files here, you can select them all, bring them all in at once. And then what's going to happen is you'll have, a bunch of lists of images, and you'll have to still manually, drag and drop and associate them with their respective citations. I don't believe there's an automatic way. So here's what happens. I'll show you. Here's what happens when you, apologies for all the things I have open. If you drag and drop something into Zotero, it will do its best guess at what the thing is and create a citation for it. So what that means, and I'm going to actually move back over here so we're not confused. I'm going to drag and drop this file into Zotero. And it's just going to show up as a standalone file. If it's a PDF, so this is an image. I actually need a PDF. Okay, so that doesn't exist anymore. I literally just need any PDF. Oh, nope, scan's not going to have. Okay, here is a PDF. Oh, you know what? This is happening because these files are not on this computer. I'm using my work laptop. So if I had a PDF on my desktop, what I was going to show you is by dragging and dropping that in here, this would have a PDF icon, and it would create a citation for, if that PDF was, an article, it would create an article citation. And then you can change the item type and all of that. I hope that wasn't too confusing, but essentially if you drag and drop things in, it's going to by default store a copy of them. So this doesn't have the link icon, right? Because I dragged and dropped it from my desktop. So this copy of this image is in the Zotero folder now. All right. Yeah, if you're interested in having a conversation about that, or if there's topics, someone mentioned Devin Think. I'm not familiar with that. So if folks have other topics that you're interested in discussing or asking about, please do send us an email. I'm going to move back over to this. We have some links here. So we have additional resources for learning Zotero, but also if you have additional questions for that Devin Think question, I'll ask you to either follow up with us or send a note to the Ask a Librarian on our library websites, because that's not something I'm familiar with, unfortunately. But I'm happy to help with other additional questions. And yeah, we'll send out an email with all of these resources and a link to the recording of this video. So thank you all for participating. I hope this was helpful.